Okay.
How was the online experience with all the students being dispersed?
It's going great. I mean, it's of course not the same thing because you missed all the social experience that was kind of a big asset of the school. But I think we adapted very well to the circumstances. Students are enjoying, labs are working well. It's kind of, there was like a new dynamic in talks for people asking questions. I think overall, we end up having more Q&A than before because you can just post your questions in Q&A. Hi, Ellie.
Hey, Ellie.
I was confused for a second. I think I was just watching you guys, but I wasn't actually in the meeting. So I'm not sure how is everyone.
Actually, do you mind if I take some photos? Does anybody?
No?
It's okay.
It's fine.
Oh, yeah.
I have a neutral background.
Okay, I'll take some.
If somebody wants a LXMLS background, let me know. I send you.
Well, I got a t-shirt instead, so 2018.
Oh, look at that.
I think the Nicos also has one.
Oh, and they also have one.
Mine is a bit older. So
wow.
Same as Nicos.
This is from the second year.
Personal details.
Oh, it's the same as Nicos. Nice.
Guys, just smile. I'm going to take the picture. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Cool. Nice. It was a nice picture.
Oh, with
the cat. Cats have this sixth sense for the photos, right? Whenever there's a camera, they know.
Got it, Marsa.
Cat photobombing. It's one of these things that comes with the pandemic. Oh, this is Mario. Mario.
Yes, for some reason, I was frozen in some other room. Hello.
Nice background.
With coffee. So, yeah, it's actually a view from my office, but I'm not there.
I was debating whether to take a screenshot of my office background and then having that as a virtual background, just to see whether anybody notices.
But I have the best office background ever, because it is really my office background.
Ah.
You shouldn't stay at the office too late, I gotta say.
This is not today for sure. It is maybe last October or something like that.
Okay, so maybe we can get started.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, hello everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion about careers in machine learning. So, as you know, it has been mentioned several times. This is the 10th year of the Lisbon Machine Learning School. So this all started in 2011 as a crazy idea from 3 PhD students at the time, me, João Graça, and Luís Charamentos. And we had immediate support from 2 professors at IST, Mário Figueiredo, who is here, and Isabel Troncoso, and also Fernando Pereira from Google. So Google has sponsored us from the first year, and the school has grown ever since. So this year there was a slight decrease in the number of participants, but commonly you have in the last years we had more than 200 people. So I'm overall we are I think I can speak by the other organizers, extremely proud of how much we have achieved and how much the school has contributed in these 10 years to foster research in machine learning and NLP all over the world. And so this year we decided to try something new. We decided to have this discussion panel to reflect a little bit on these past 10 years. And we did that by inviting 5 former students of LXMLS to be panelists. Nicos Aletras, Ellie Pavlick, Dirk Hovy, Barbara Plank, and Ronald Cardenas. I think Joe is going to introduce them very, very shortly. And we are also very grateful to Kyunghyun, not only for the amazing talk that he gave yesterday, but also for accepting our invitation to moderate this panel today. So without further ado, let's get started.
Okay, well, thanks for the invitation to moderate this panel with the amazing panelists. So before we begin, I'm going to introduce the panelists very briefly. So we have 5 amazing panelists, and all of them were at some point students at LXMLS. going all the way back to 2012, which was the second iteration of the summer school. And 4 of them are at the moment professors. And then one of them is a PhD student. So I gotta say, the LXMLS has been educating all these students amazingly well. So we have Nicos, who was a student in LXMLS 2012, who was back then a PhD student at the University of Sheffield, and now is a lecturer, which is the equivalent of the associate professor, I think, in the US at the same university. And we have Ellie, who was a student at LXMLS in 2013. Back then, she was a PhD student at UPenn, and now is an assistant professor at Brown University and also a research scientist at Google AI. And Barbara Plank was a student in 2014, and then back then was a postdoc at the University of Copenhagen, and is now an associate professor at IT University of Copenhagen. So everyone tends to come back to where they were, back when they were attending LXMLS. And then Dirk Hovy, he was a student in 2013, and then was a postdoc at University of Copenhagen, and he's now an associate professor at Bocconi University in Milan, Italy. And then we have the final panelist is Ronald Cardenas, who participated at the summer school in 2014. And back then he was an undergrad in Lima, Peru. And now he's a PhD student in the Center for Data Technology, Data Science program, in NLP program. I'm sorry about that. I should have checked that, at the University of Edinburgh. So with all these amazing panelists, of course, we need to hear from them directly, their journey since they attended the LXMLS. So they've ended up being awesome. We all know them now. But between the time they attended the summer school and now, what kind of journey have they taken so far? So shall we start with the Nicos?
Hi, yeah, thanks Joe for the introduction, and thanks Andre for the invitation. Actually, I accepted it with great pleasure because when I attended in 2012, I had a great time, of course, visiting Lisbon and meeting all these amazing fellow researchers that I had the opportunity actually to meet them again in conferences. But I think my main benefit from attending LXMLS was that I came back to, I didn't go straight away back to the office. I went to on holidays in Greece for 2 weeks, but then in September I went back to the office, and I was like full of ideas for continue my research for my PhD, and it helped me a lot put things into perspective, because I was like just finishing my first year, going into the second year, and I think it helped me a lot to actually see what is important in the NLP at that time. And yeah, I just learned very useful things that I used in my research and also later in my career, because I did briefly a postdoc in UCL after graduating, and then I joined Amazon. 1 year I worked for Alexa in natural language understanding, and the second year I was working for CoreML, actually like a consultancy within Amazon. For more machine learning oriented projects, before getting back to Sheffield for as being an assistant professor. So I think in general, it's just great experience. And I mean, I see many people that I met for the first time 8 years ago in conferences and in the community. I'm really happy about that. And actually you get very good t-shirts. I don't know if you had the chance of getting t-shirts this year, but I mean, you can see the quality is really good. I have it for 8 years. I even wear to play basketball.
Okay, so thanks for the sharing your journey with us. In fact, I just want to follow up quickly. Is that I noticed that one of your most cited papers is called "Evaluating Topic Coherence Using Distributional Semantics," and that's from 2013, which is immediately after you attended the summer school in 2012. I must ask, has the summer school in fact inspired you to write this paper that was extremely well cited, and in fact the most cited papers of yours?
Well, actually, in fact, if I have to be honest here, that paper was rejected by Calling, and I resubmitted later. But I think after finishing the summer school, I actually submitted a paper in NACL and got accepted. and that was my first, let's say, major publication in an like top NLP venue. And I think the impact of attending LXMLS was crucial for me designing the experiments actually before the knuckle deadline back in 2013.
Okay, that's great to hear for the students of this year's summer school as well. So they're going to get the amazing papers after this summer school. All right, so shall we then move on to Ellie? Ellie, would you like to share your journey since the summer school?
Yeah, for sure. I can echo Nicos here. Like this, so I guess it was 2013. It seems much more recently than that, but that was the summer after my first year of grad school. So I think of like when I think of like actually like formative, like kickstarting my whole NLP career, like I associated with that summer because I'd never met anyone outside of like my advisor in my university, right? Like I hadn't gone to conferences yet. And so that was like my first time like meeting kind of the NLP community. And this summer school was such a nice place to do that because it was quite small. So you got to talk to like, you know, famous people that you might not like go up to. I mean, conferences are huge now. But then it was like everyone went to dinner, went out for drinks, and it was just like a mix of like much more senior people and students. And so I think it was like very, it was just a really pleasant welcome into the field that made you like kind of want to stay and be a part of things. And you're like, oh, I need to write papers so I can keep going to conferences and hang out with people. So yeah, it was a really, like a really positive start, I think, to just like my whole grad school career. And yeah, I think in terms of the actual like scientific content, I remember it being great. So like that first year of grad school, I had taken like the machine learning class, but that's a bit different. So like this was like, you could see some similar themes, but like this was specifically tied to language. So like that was the first time that I'd like read a lot of papers and not really known some of the words they were talking about. I remember like CRFs were a thing that I like read about in a ton of papers and I didn't really know what a CRF was. And we didn't cover that in a machine learning class because it's kind of a languagey thing. Or it just like didn't make it into the main, like a lot of structured prediction stuff was like a very NLP topic that didn't get a ton of attention. Our machine learning class was a vision guy teaching it, you know, that kind of like those kinds of biases. So I think then you're like, oh, I'm around my own people. We care about the same problems. And so I got exposed to a lot of those types of ideas, which then just helped a ton coming back and having had that. And then I think a lot of it was just really like meeting people who you then continue to see at conferences. Like, I think I was like, I actually like, so you had sent around some questions, you were commented that I think my first paper was published the following year. And so you asked a similar thing, like, did this kickstart? I think I was fielding my first rejection that summer. It was like a tackle rejection. And then it was great because I had like all these older students around me who could be like, no, don't worry about this, happens all the time. Like that kind of like nice support. And then the following summer when I finally published it, it was like all those same people who came and saw my first talk. And I think like those kinds of, those types of connections are just amazing.
Oh, that's actually great to hear. And in fact, if I remember correctly, you actually were in the same year as Dirk when Dirk was a student at the LXMLS. And I think it's a very natural way, natural step for us to actually ask Dirk how his experience in 2013 was. Now we're going to contrast this with the Ellie's experience that was very, very positive, and then hear how he has been doing ever since.
Dirk was my main buddy there, so we had a similar.
Okay, so but we'll see how similar that was, and then how it was after the summer school for Dirk as well. So Dirk, would you like to share your experience with us?
Totally. Yeah, so I was at a different point. I had just finished my PhD and I was about to start my postdoc in Copenhagen, and I was sort of like moving over. I think I dropped all my stuff in Copenhagen, flew over to Lisbon, and my postdoc was starting with this woman that I knew of but had never met, named Barbara Planck. And I was like, oh, I wonder who that is. And you know, I don't think we had actually met yet, even though we were starting in the same job. And then I went to Lisbon and I met Ellie there. I think the first day or something. I was living with a friend of mine in an Airbnb, and we had this backyard with a barbecue. So we had like barbecue sessions and invented the snack steak. So it was a very, very positive like summer experience just to be there. but it was also, because for me it was this transition period between two positions and like sort of your CV career ladder steps. I felt it kind of was, if it was the time for me to go and experience LXMLS, I'd come across the note tutorial, the lecture notes and handout, I think the year before, maybe 2 years before, during my PhD, final year of my PhD. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best explanation of CRFs I've actually ever seen. And it has code, this is amazing. I wish I could go to this, this would be great. And then I saw, oh, it's happening again. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna be in Europe, I totally need to go before I'm a postdoc. And like, this is sort of my last chance to get, you know, like this experience before this new thing starts. And it was, yeah, it was amazing for the camaraderie and for the, you know, sort of exposure to like so many like, you know, great researchers, having the talks in the morning and the evening, and having all of these different topics sort of in like such a dense time. It sort of acted both as a refresher of all the things I'd learned and then conveniently forgotten, and as like an inspiration of like, oh, I want to try these things, you know, in like papers and in like projects myself. I remember one of the, so like as a explanation for how things have changed, one of the topics was like learning with big data, and I think it was MapReduce, which was the big thing back then. I don't know like how many people are still like thinking of MapReduce as the big thing, but that was back then. I don't think there were lectures on neural networks, but it was sort of like it was already in the woodworks, and like outside of the lectures, everybody was talking about, have you heard about this? Have you read this paper? And it was, yeah, it was just an amazing sort of finishing like bow tie on the PhD experience, and a great start to being back in Europe and then as a postdoc. One last thing I wanted to say was that I was really excited also that this happened in Europe, because it felt like coming from Europe and then going to the US, there were like sort of two schools, and like Europe was much less sort of statistical machine learning-y, if you generalize, than the US. And like having this was sort of like a breath of fresh air. And I sort of then, you know, pushed like all my students in the coming years to go and also experience that, because it was such a, such a wonderful time.
So yes, so confirmed. So the LXMLS 2013 was definitely of the positive experience. But I must ask actually Ellie and Dirk once more, because I noticed that the both of you had to mention how awesome it was to learn about CRF in 2013. And then I don't know who actually taught CRF back in 2013. If you could share with us, you know, who taught it, and then how memorable the lecture was, that you couldn't just resist talking about CRF. Both of you actually at the same time, right? So do you want to talk about it? Either Ellie, Dirk, either of you?
I was trying to check out who it was. Ellie, do you remember?
No, I don't. That's the funny thing. I just remember that being a thing that I always came across in papers, and I didn't know what it was. And again, like a first year grad student, I didn't really have a CS background. So when I like Googled it, I was like, I don't know what this is. It was confusing. And then finally someone gave a lecture. It might have been like Chris Dyer or Noah Smith. I remember them both giving lectures.
I think it was Xavier.
Yeah, it was Xavier.
Yeah, it was Xavier. Most likely Xavier.
Yeah.
But I'd like to add that like at one of the last evenings, we were also introduced to like the brandy called CRF. And like, I think Andrea said, like, this is the actual better CRF that you should always use.
Yeah, there is a photo. I don't know if it was from that year or the year after, with Fernando Pereira next to a CRF bottle. I was actually looking for the photo right now, but I couldn't find it.
But I believe Andre will be able to share the photo on the Slack so that everyone can see how, you know, what CRF photo looks like, and then, you know, how it tastes like as well. I'm pretty sure you'll describe it, right? Yes. Okay, so that's great. So I mean, the 2013 was a very productive year and a very enlightening year. Now we'll move on to the 2014 now. And then we're going to hear also from another postdoc participant back then, next to Dirk, from 2014, Barbara. So Barbara, you are a postdoc back then, and then you attended the summer school. has it actually changed anything about how you do your research or what kind of topics you focus on since then?
Yeah, right. So this was, in fact, I was a bit on the maybe older side by now, but this was the time when essentially I met Dirk. He came just back from XLMS, and I met him. So we really met the first day I worked there, and he was so excited about it, and he told me about it actually, and it was like, oh, this sounds awesome. If all this material produced and everything kind of connected each other. So I felt like I want to go instantly. So I had to wait another year, and luckily they took me, also as a postdoc. So it was one of my early years as a postdoc, and I felt like definitely you always learn stuff, right? As a PhD, you're typically working in a rather small area where you're really specializing in. And that was for me dependency parsing, for instance, back then. And so I had a little bit of other work done before, or moved to some other area in my first year of the postdoc. But then I came to XMLS, and now suddenly these big connections were drawn, and you just extend your horizon by the material you learn about, but also by the people you're meeting. And one thing which I really remember also is then we were sitting there in the evening lecture by Phil Blumson, and it was kind of the opposite experience because he was talking about neural machine translation, and it was like completely crazy what he was like. This can't work. So we were not learning anything about neural nets back then, but it was all traditional ML, and yeah, it was kind of we were all a bit skeptical, but we didn't really know at this stage, right? You don't have the full picture in mind, but this was kind of definitely something I will remember from this period here. And in general, I feel, one thing which maybe another angle, if you come as a postdoc to this, is that you see how it's taught. And I took a lot of inspiration from it for the teaching that I carried on later. So just making this, I have seen other, like, unless Ellie, who saw the first summer school, I was at others, and they were just like lectures in the traditional sense. There's someone coming in and they're giving a lecture and then leaving. And maybe you have a question, the chance to ask one question. So if you're lucky, but this was really a different experience. So I since then highly recommend it to any of the students or anyone essentially, because I met also quite some people who got together, or even I know, some families being born of this, and the impact is really long lasting. We see also now Athens NLP, right? It's kind of a new branch, you could almost say, of LXMLS, or inspired by LXMLS. So it has really profound impact on the field as such, and also, showing people. Remember also there was, I think you had Andreas Müller back then as one of the speakers as well. Was that the case? So someone, you know about this sklearn toolkit. It was used widely, but suddenly the person who is actually the main initiator, or one of the main initiators. So he was coming over. So it's just, getting to actually talk to the people you might otherwise never meet, or they're suddenly there to talk to you. So yeah.
Oh, that's great to hear. Actually, I didn't know that Andy actually ever gave a lecture at LXMLS. He used to be my colleague at NYU. Well,
yeah, now he's at NYU, right? Yeah.
He's now in Columbia. Well, he's in Microsoft research. So Columbia poached Andy from NYU, and then the Microsoft poached Andy from Columbia. So it looks like the speakers from the LXMLS are doing very well as well. So that's good. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Now, so I saved the most interesting case among our panelists to the last. So Ronald was an undergrad student back when he attended the LXMLS in 2014. When I go to conferences these days, and then we see so many amazing undergrads. But I do think that that trend only started about, let's say, 2-3 years ago at best. I mean, like 5 years ago, you'd not see any undergrad. 7 years ago, definitely not. The first year PhD student would be also quite rare anyway. But somehow he was able to come to LXMLS, attending the summer school as an undergrad in 2014, when I believe he was a senior student back in Peru. So Ronald, I wanted to actually ask you first, how did you actually find the summer school to start with? as an undergrad, because when I was an undergrad, I never even knew that there was such thing as summer school to start with. And then what motivates you to attend this particular summer school?
Thanks, Kyunghyun. Well, at that time, I was starting reading papers in NLP, not really understanding much, to be honest, but but I came across these big names like Noah Smith and Slav Petrov, and after checking their websites, sometimes they mentioned that they were lecturers at this summer school, XMLS, but of course the summer school website always mentioned that PhD students are able to apply. And then the first thing I did was to ask if I, as an undergrad, could actually apply. And the organizer said that, yeah, you can try, please do so. And I did. That's how I came to know about it. What was my motivation behind it? Well, a friend of mine, a senior classmate in university, had attended a similar summer school the previous year, the machine learning summer school. And he was, the impact it had in him, it was great. He went on to do a PhD in California, and he's now a postdoc in MIT in neuroscience. So besides all the knowledge in machine learning that he got, the actual experience of interacting with like-minded people and having a kind of a panoramic view of the field helped him a lot. And I thought that I want to try that. And my first summer school was XMLS. Then I was lucky to attend another one the next year, the machine learning summer school in Japan.
Okay, so that's great. In fact, I have one really interesting follow-up question. I'm going to assume that none of the speakers is in either a panel or in the attendance. So, you mentioned you read the NLP papers and then found some awesome authors such as Noah Smith and Slav Petrov. And I believe that both of them have been speakers at this summer school for many, many years. In fact, almost all the years over the past 10 years. Now, when you actually attended the summer school in 2014 and listened to the Noah and Slav giving lectures, were they as awesome as you thought they would by reading their own papers? How did you feel the lectures were for you?
No, they definitely exceeded my expectations. Yeah, they were kind of the superstars of the moment, right?
Okay. And then so they exceeded your expectation, but if you had to think of the most memorable lectures from 2014, because you told all of us that you weren't really sure about the NLP papers that you're reading, so some of the lectures must have been most memorable to you. Which lecture or the lecture was most memorable? Probably besides CRF lecture, hopefully. Otherwise, we'll have to give whoever has been teaching CRF, Xavier, I think, some kind of award. But if there's anything else, then please share it with us.
Yeah, but I think that the lecture that made the most impression on me was Noah Smith's about HMMs and tagging, because it was the best lecture I had in my life, probably up to that moment. Very well explained, easy to follow. Second place probably is Slav Petrov's lecture on dependency parsing, especially that part when he puts into perspective all the methods that existed up to that point, in a very nice way to understand and compare them. Very interesting.
Okay, so Noah's lectures are amazing. Yes, I agree. But generally, everyone is a big fan of tagging with the CRF or HMM. Looks like so, except for Barbara, who actually shared with us that she was most impressed by the Phil's NeuroMT lecture, which I'm very glad to hear about. But that said, Nicos, you're 2 years before, let's say, Ronald and others. So back then, which was the most memorable lecture for you? We can't hear you.
Yeah. I have to say Noah Smith. Actually, he gave a keynote talk on text regression, if I remember correctly. It was like, I don't know, sentiment analysis on movie reviews, and they were doing. I think he was doing some research on social media at the time, and basically that actually inspired me to follow. I mean, together with some other colleagues in Sheffield that they were working on this field, but it helped me to develop another strand of research on social media at the time, that it was completely unrelated to my PhD topic. But I have to say, Slav Petrov's talk was really impressive as well. But I mean, if I have to compare, Slav is more like, let's say, more serious. He's like a classical music kind of gig. Noah is a bit more like Mick Jagger, you know. So it depends on your music tastes.
Okay, I mean, so I never expected this panel to talk about the style of music, and then I didn't know that the Mick Jagger was actually show up. But you know, I'm glad to see that that's happening. So, well, all the panelists, thanks for sharing your journey and then your experience back in the summer schools. By the way, so to the attendees who are attending this panel, if you have any questions, please do write it up in the QA panel. And then as I moderate this panel, I'm going to try to see if any questions could be answered by everyone, and I'll try to share them. So that was, let's say, about 7 years back, or for some, 9 years back. But then I think it's going to be a good idea for us as the participants of the summer school to hear about what you're doing now that 7 to 9 years have passed. And then if you could actually share with us your own research, and then perhaps put in a context of what you learned in the summer school as well. That would be great for all the participants. So how about we go in the opposite direction, and then we start from Ronald again. Ronald, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot over and over, but that is the part of being a panelist in this awesome panel. So please go ahead.
Fine. Sure, thanks. Well, right now, I just finished my first year in the PhD program. So far, I've only got a kind of a rough idea of the topic I want to research about and the kind of questions I want to ask. But the main idea is to embed an inductive bias into summarizers. But this inductive bias would come from cognitive models of human memory. So what we want is to teach machines how to remember a specific content while summarizing, as in the same way as humans do.
Okay, that's very interesting in the way that humans do. That's, I think, the one thing that we don't really teach at LXMLS, what humans do. But okay, yeah. That's very interesting. Thank you. And then, because we're going in the opposite direction, I think, Barbara, would you like to share what you've been working on these days?
Yeah, sure. So I have now a small lab, and we are working on essentially multilingual and cross-domain representations, robustness in NLP in general, kind of how can you tackle this variation that we find in language, which is, we don't know really what factors go into this, but all sorts of domain shifts, how we can make systems more robust to this. We also try to contribute to low resource languages at the moment, for instance, for here in Denmark as well. But what else? We focus, one of the students here is also working on speech, for instance. Yeah, but my general research interest is in this variation and how to make NLP models more robust, mostly to processing, not generation, but information extraction, parsing, sequence labeling, those kind of direction. Yeah.
So that actually raises an interesting question, because when I look at the course materials for the LXMLS and then also the kind of evening research talks, I don't think that the summer school is dealing too much of the topic of the robustness or dealing with the low resource languages. Do you have any suggestions for the next decade of the LXMLS on what kind of topic should be included in the curriculum? in order for the students to learn to build a more robust and so that they can be using their real life systems?
Right. That's a very good question. There could be an evening lecture on robustness and out of domain or out of distribution generalization, right? I think probably most of them touch to some degree aspects on it. Maybe bringing, I don't know what the labs are doing, but probably they do now, bringing real data sets with multiple genres, multiple languages into the playground as well. Maybe also, the biases in annotations, thinking about, where we see, we can draw from what's happening in the community as an inspiration. I think that LXMLS is very good in this to keep up. I'm really amazed, with the speed the field is moving. LXMLS is really trying to, keep up with the topics. So it's hard to give good suggestions when it's already so good. So.
Well, the LXMLS will just have to invite you over for an evening talk next year.
Yeah, I didn't.
To discuss about the robustness in NLP. Yes. Well, thanks for the suggestion. I believe that the organizers are all taking notes as you speak. So, okay, that's
so
great.
you are.
I'm taking note as well, of course. Yes,
Yeah.
For my own courses. Yes, thank you. And then, we're going to let's move to Dirk then. Yes, Dirk, could you share with us, what you've been doing, and then perhaps tell us what is the thing that you're working on that has not been handled in LXMLS and what has been handled in LXMLS?
Yeah, it's a good big question. So before I went into NLP, before I did my PhD, I actually got a master's degree or magister back then in sociolinguistics. So I was kind of interested in variation. How do different people speak differently? Then I switched and did NLP, something completely different. And then in the postdoc together with Barbara, we worked a lot on domain adaptation and how we can make models more robust for training on Twitter, but then applying things on the web, or training on the Wall Street Journal and applying it to Twitter. And I started thinking wait, but if we do this for domains, then shouldn't we also do this for different dialects or different age groups, or maybe men and women? And so I started looking into that, and it turned out that there's a lot of variation and a lot of effects of sort of demographic domains on how we process data. So that has become one of my research interests. How do demographic differences, how do social differences and the social nature of language influence our tools? How can we incorporate that to make them better? And then digging more at that, it turned out very quickly that there are actually differences in performance for different demographic groups. So we found that part of speech taggers work a lot better if you're older than 45 than if you're younger than 35 back at the time we did it. And that it worked better if you use certain dialects or ethnolex than if you use others. And so I got interested in these differences based on demographic features of the authors. And so that led me into exploring bias, and that sort of led into me exploring ethics. I worked with an ethicist. I sort of wrote down a couple of ideas that I had and things that I'd found, and then she explained what that was in terms of ethics, which then sort of led to a paper, which then led to ethics and NLP workshops, and that is sort of has become the other part, the other leg I stand on academically. Now, neither the demographic and social aspects of language and their adaptation nor the ethical aspects of NLP have been part in the LXMLS curriculum when I was attending it back then. But I think what it has done is it has sort of laid the foundation, like a solid, technical knowledge and understanding of how NLP works, the nuts and bolts of it. And it really gave me the confidence to read any paper and be like, okay, I actually know how this could be implemented or how this works underneath. And that knowledge also then lets you sort of look beyond sort of the outcomes and to the why and the understanding of how this fits into a larger context, like society, like fairness. And so I think, having that is great and has given me a lot of confidence and comfort. And I want to echo Barbara that I think what makes LXMLS so strong is that it is so flexible, and that the program has changed, right? Like when I was there was nothing about neural networks, and now obviously that is a big topic and that gets covered. So I think having that flexibility and having these shifts and giving people this really, really rock solid foundation is great to then, you know, from there on, like use that as your base and then spread your wings and, you know, explore other things.
Yeah, so that's great actually advice for participants as well. In fact, Dirk and Barbara just gave them a next direction that they need to pursue. And then because the summer school has trained all of them really well, they'll be able to pursue it themselves as well. So that's great to hear. Now, shall we move on to Ellie? What have you been working on? And then would you like to share that with the participants of the summer school?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I guess the main area that I'm in now, or kind of always been interested in, is semantic representation. So I guess like Ronald was saying, kind of using human language and human language representations as inspiration. So a lot of my current work has been kind of in conjunction with linguists and cognitive science, as well as with computer science. And then I guess like Barbara, I'm doing kind of a lot of robustness and interpretability work, because that tends to kind of go hand in hand. So it's like we have some notion that humans' representations are robust and they make kinds of generalizations that neural nets don't make. So there's kind of a lot of interest in what are the neural nets learning, what kind of representations are they using, what's the same, what's different, and how can we make them better. So I guess that's where most of my work is now, is kind of on the analysis and interpretation of what neural nets are learning, and kind of comparing and contrasting that with different theories of how we think semantics should be represented. And then I have, I guess in line with that, because so much of human language is kind of grounded and situated, I have some projects with the robotics and computer vision groups trying to do more grounded language learning, which is I'm really excited about now. I don't know what LXMLS is currently doing in terms of stuff that's not language, but interfaces. There's a lot more work now in the NLP conferences on multimodal and grounded language and things like that. It seems like a really important part of language representations in general. So I'm not sure if that's going on there now, but it would be cool to see. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a slightly different topic from the ones that we heard about, heard from Ronald, Dirk, and Barbara, because there was a mention of the robotics as well. But then of course, there's always a question about how focused each summer school should be, or how broad each summer school should be. So Ellie, you seem to indicate that your research has broadened quite a bit. But then what do you think about the consequence for the summer school? Would the summer school start try to, let's say, broaden its scope, or should it actually narrow it down even further in a particular, let's say, technical foundation, as Dirk may have been alluding to without intention, maybe? But what do you think? Yes.
I mean, I don't know that I would have to be the right one to know how that would work. Like, I think one thing I have liked about the summer school in the past is there's a focus on the machine learning part, right? And that in a way kind of ends up being this kind of common language and methods that join together a lot of these different problems that we care about. So like all of us working on language, like we care about representations, we care about structures, we care about what kinds of supervision you have, we care about like those types of problems. And so I think there's some unifying language. The evening talks are a nice way to kind of hear cool applications and things that might be more out there. But in terms of kind of the fundamentals, like, I don't know if like grounded language is a thing that's a fundamental thing so much as understanding, the different neural nets, different kinds of structures and inductive biases and those kinds of things that are trendy and can unify a lot of stuff. I remember liking that about summer school, and it was this kind of like focus on the machine learning piece of it, and that kind of brought together things that otherwise might feel quite disparate, right? You're like parsing and speech or whatever, and it can feel really disparate. And then you're like, oh, there's some kind of common language to that. So.
Okay, so I almost think I hear that the LXMLS has been doing amazingly well. So I was actually trying to push into the direction of trying to to give the constructive criticism, but perhaps for the next question. But before we move on to the next question, we need to hear from the Nicos, the fifth panelist we have. Yes. Can you share with us what you've been doing, and then whether what you've been doing has anything to do with the contents of the LXMLS, or is there something that is missing from the summer school that you've been using or working on a lot?
Yeah, sure. Actually, as I said earlier, the summer school helped me in this afternoon evening sessions to broaden up a little bit of my horizons in terms of what applications are out there, and where I apply machine learning in the context of natural language processing, and actually that led me to work on social media or computational social science, if you prefer, where actually we try to find applications of natural language processing and help social scientists to get insights into large amounts of data. And I mean, I could stretch it a little bit here, because I started working on Twitter, and basically all the applications are as Dirk said, about social linguistics, and then you can help political scientists, you can help psychologists. But then I had this idea, okay, how about applications of natural language processing in the legal domain? And actually, I have expanded into that area as well. In general, now in Sheffield, actually, I have a small-ish group, and we work in various different aspects of natural language processing. I have a couple of students working on interpretability of neural networks, data efficient learning, trying to use probabilistic machine learning, but that was not because of the LXMLS. That was because the people that I was hanging out together in Amazon. But yeah, definitely. I think in terms of the focus, setting the foundations is really helpful for first year PhD students in general, but also postdocs as well, because if you set the foundations, then you can easily adapt or open new research areas, right? If we all agree that machine learning drives recent advances in natural language processing, having a very good, solid understanding of machine learning concepts actually helps a lot in the long run.
Okay, so the strong foundation built at the summer school seems to be the one common theme that goes across all the panelists at the moment. So I'm glad to hear that. And then it seems like LXMLS should probably even delve deeper into machine learning in the next decade for the first years. So this is all good. So we've been talking about all these positive stuffs, and I believe that all the attendees of the summer school have learned a lot about what are not only the actual algorithms in machine learning, but what are the things that they can do with those machine learning algorithms by listening to all the panelists. And then we've heard about the many interesting directions, such as trying to understand the sociolinguistics using these machine learning algorithms, trying to ensure that these machine learning algorithms or the NLP systems work more robustly for the low resource languages. And then we even learned about the legal domain as well. So the use of the NLP in the legal domain. So these are all positive things, but I need to bring us back into the real world a bit at the moment, unfortunately, because that is a big thing. And then as you have noticed, until last year, LXMLS has been in-person events. And this year, due to the COVID-19 and pandemic, it had to go on fully online. And the big question is, in this era, this new era of the remote participation into summer schools and conferences and so on, a lot of things that people have taken as granted are not there anymore, and then we can't really do what we used to do. And then that's especially going to be challenging for a lot of people who just entered the field, because they expected what people who have been in the field went through, but they are not going to go through the same thing. Is there anything that you as a panelist would like to share about this experience, new set of experience that they're going to go through? And then do you have any advice to them in this era of the remote participation? So it's a difficult question, I understand, but I think this is a necessary question that I had to ask all the panelists. And then just following the tradition that I just made up about 15 minutes ago, we'll go in the opposite direction again. We'll start with the Nicos. Yes, do you have any suggestions to the attendees who are participating in this summer school remotely? Is there anything else they could do in order to make the best out of this summer school?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, and actually, I was thinking about it because all of the top like conferences in the field have been moved online this year. Actually, ACL a month ago was held online. I think what is difficult in online events is this social aspect, right? I mean, I would meet you guys there and actually we say, okay, let's go for food. We can have a drink and get a coffee, right? This is, and I mean, it's if you think about it, is an easier way to discuss ideas as well. So, for example, we can meet and say, okay, I'm working on that. Oh, that sounds interesting. Let's go and write a paper when we go back to our bases, right? But I mean, it's a bit more difficult given the circumstances. So I don't know what you got, Andrea. I don't know what you have done. However, my student that is attending, I don't know if she's attending now, actually was very happy for the town hall, this kind of online virtual platform that you use.
Town.
Yeah, and we had a meeting, and she told me that actually works quite well, and it's something that we didn't have in ACL, for example, and it was a little bit harder to socialize and meet people randomly this year. So I guess that that is a good thing to do. But anyways, I could advise everyone that attended virtually this year to attend Lisbon in person in the first possible occasion, because Lisbon is a great city.
Yep, that I don't think anybody can disagree with that. Okay, Lisbon is a great city. So then, shall we go to Ellie? Would you like to share what you've been experiencing about all this remote participation? And then do you have any advice to the participants about remote participation, not only to this summer school, but for many, let's say, following events?
Yeah, well, yeah, it makes me sad thinking of people not getting to be there in person. I'm pulling up all my photos now while other people are talking, and I'm like, oh man, I have these good things, these good times. So yeah, you should go to Lisbon when you get a chance, just for the experience of that. But yeah, I completely agree that the social aspect is the hardest to replicate. Like watching talks is easy, and reading papers and like that that part you can replicate, like the actual science and technical piece, quite a bit, but it's the socializing which ends up being a mix of just like fun hanging out and then talking about actual ideas like that. You get a lot of that informal part. I think once you already know people, then reaching out like at ACL and being like, let's have virtual happy hour or something is easy to do. But I think for people who are joining, like if I picture myself when at the time that I attended as a very young student, that'd be hard. So I mean, it's advice I can give, but not from personal experience. I would say like do like the thing that would be very awkward, which is like cold reach out to people and be like, let's have a virtual happy hour. And that sounds really awkward to do like over Zoom with people you don't know. But I think a nice thing about being there in person is basically you have to do that awkward thing because you need to get dinner and you don't know the people and it's like a forced thing. And then you get over it and then it's and then it becomes easier. But I think it's easy to avoid not doing the awkward thing when you're home and you're like, that sounds unpleasant to have to like make chit chat over Zoom. But I would probably say do it. It'll be like a fun shared experience down the road when you look back and you're like, remember how the first time we met was like over those weird Zoom hangs or something? Because I think that once things do become in person again, like those personal connections are really important. So yeah, I would say do that, even though I can't even necessarily picture myself doing that. I'd be like, oh, that sounds awful. Just reaching out to random people and being like, let's have a Zoom call. But maybe that's what I would say.
That's a great advice. Yes, it is indeed actually awkward even in person to hang out with the random strangers for the first time. So in a sense, if it's going to be awkward, why don't you try it over, online as well, right? And then you still get to know people. Okay, so we finally have some, let's say, positive aspect. Well, let's call it neutral aspect of the full remote participation. So following the transition, now, Dirk, do you have any positive observation about full remote participation that you want to share with the participants? Unless you don't have anything, okay, that'll be fine as well.
No, so I mean, I want to echo everything that has been said. Obviously, yeah, this is not the same as hanging out in real person. Yeah, that's like Ellie and I met at LXMLS for the first time. I think like it's testament to sort of also the social nature of LXMLS that basically all the panelists and people on the call know each other through LXMLS and conferences. And not having that, I think, is hard. I think science is a community effort, and research is a community effort. You're not an island. You're never, just by yourself. You're part of a much larger community, and I think there is something positive here because the NLP community, the ACL community, actually is a really friendly community. And that makes it nice and appealing to actually hang out in person, and that makes it sad that we cannot do it this year. But it also means people are really open-minded and like welcoming to people sort of doing the weird, awkward cold calling thing. I've definitely benefited from it. I think everybody else here has probably at one point or another benefited it, that they went to, this like big name research and were like, so I read your paper and I have a question. And then they were like, oh, cool. Can you tell me about it? Like, what did you think? And, what's your feedback? So try and have that, like, do, maybe see whether you can do the Zoom Hangout thing, which, yeah, is like, it's not easy, but it is, it's easier to coordinate than like getting 1,500 people into the same city in the world. It's easier to do across time zones because nobody has like, jet lag. And, like, make it a social thing. Don't make it like an awkward, sort of like job interview. Have a beer or, whatever you like to have, like, sit there, like go sit on your terrace or, try being, like make it a friendly hangout. And sort of working off of that is, yeah, like, do write to people, do build a network, stay in touch with the people you've been with at LXMLS, write to the people you've met, like us here in the panel, reach out if you have an idea, if you have a thought, if you are working on a paper and you think like, oh, I kind of want to know what Barbara thinks about this because she's the expert on this. People in the community are amazingly responsive and amazingly friendly. Yes, occasionally an email will not get answered because people are also super busy, but in general, there's a lot of goodwill and there's a lot of friendliness. So do, make use of that and sort of build and maintain this network. And if you can, go to the conferences or, maybe also see whether you can set up get-togethers or, research visits. I think there's a new initiative that I've seen on Twitter, NLP with Friends, where people sort of give remote presentations. That's another great idea. So yeah, like don't think you have to do it all alone. You're part of a big community and a friendly community, and like just jump in there and like see who catches you in a way, sort of academically and intellectually.
So it is indeed positive that we can actually do all these things remotely because we can actually transcend beyond the horizons that are set by the, like the time and physical constraints. And then now I noticed that the Dirk kind of put the Barbara on the spot by telling all the people to email her if they have any questions. So Barbara, do you want to add anything on top of what Dirk just expressed?
Yeah, email Dirk as well. No, just kidding. Yeah, of course. No, it's right. Really, I can just echo what was said so far. So one of the big advantages of NLP as a community is really it's really friendly, and it's always super nice to see you young students who maybe dare to approach one, right? Or you really can approach anyone in the field, and you will probably get a very friendly answer back. And especially if you're working on something where the person is also working on, or having joint interests, then please just reach out. That would be my advice, in fact, to get to know people, to build the network, especially if you have common interests. Then that can be really something can grow out of it. So I can just second this as well. I mean, the whole, but this is a general advice, right? This does also apply to the physical situation. One thing which is now a bit challenging, of course, is this this virtual way might cater well to some people, but might be really awful for others. You know, so perhaps some diversity in terms of what are the kind of things we can offer as providers of conferences or schools or whatever. It could be perhaps an idea. I don't know. Like I'm really curious about this town. I haven't tried it yet, so let's see how this is. But there's always this, I feel it, like if you also go to the conferences, to these Zoom sessions from posters, it's kind of like going, to a surprise Zoom room. You don't even know who is on the other side except the people presenting, right? So just dare do it. And even if you're not so comfortable, try it out. You might really find a very pleasant talk or chat behind it. And yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you. And then, in fact, as I was hearing all these answers and then great suggestions from the panelists, I just realized that, in fact, the title of this panel discussion was Careers in Machine Learning and Natural Language Processing. And then, in fact, there is a perfectly timed question from Siva Surya about what people felt when they entered this field of machine learning and NLP if they had a different background. And then I noticed that Ronald actually has background. In fact, his undergrad major was mechatronics, I believe. So, and then now he's been a research assistant and then interns various places before he ended up focusing 100% on natural language processing and machine learning at the University of Edinburgh. I was wondering, instead of continuing with this topic of the remote participation, we come back for the last final few tens of minutes for this panel discussion on the original intention of this panel discussion, that is about the careers in machine learning and natural language processing. So Ronald, would you kindly share with us how you actually transitioned from this field of mechatronics, I think, if I remember correctly. Yes, mechatronics engineering into machine learning and NLP. And then by doing so, if you didn't run into any difficulties or challenges that you had to overcome.
Sure. So the major of mechatronics is a mixture of mechanics and electronics. So it doesn't have much programming or computer science for that matter. So my first contact with machine learning and NLP was through Coursera, Michael Collins and Andrew Engine's courses back in 2012. And then the LXMLS gave me the kind of the basic foundation and the basic ideas to actually work on my undergraduate thesis project. And after that, I realized that I needed some formal training on the field. So I decided to make a master's, and I was lucky enough to be accepted to the Language and Communication Technologies program in the EU. It's a 2 years program, master program. That program is oriented to people who is not familiar with linguistics or computer science. So it gave the option of giving you the basic knowledge in both worlds. It was tough learning from theoretical computer science, but it was a great experience. I would say that I grew a lot, learned a lot.
Okay, it seems like the answer is to spend enough effort to study new stuff or the necessary background and attend LXMLS, which is, I think, a great answer to start with. But I believe it is a difficult thing to answer. But that actually reminds me that Dirk mentioned earlier that his background was in sociolinguistics. And then, of course, I don't have any idea what sociolinguistics is. I believe that that's slightly different from computer science. And then perhaps Dirk also could share with us what kind of challenges he had to go through, or how he actually overcame those challenges in order to transition to machine learning and natural language.
Yeah, gladly. So yes, sociolinguistics is very different from machine learning. It has a lot more to do about how people interact and how the social structures sort of are reflected in how we speak and in language. I saw the question on the Q&A channel. I think it's a great question. So yeah, I came from a non-CS, non-math background. I had done a little bit of programming. I was not super interested or strong in math. And then I sort of like decided, well, I'm going to do this PhD in CS, which, yeah, was a bit, it was a tough slog in the beginning, but I found out that, like I wasn't very interested in math in high school because it was taught badly. And like, as soon as you wanted to solve a problem and you needed to understand the math behind it, it got fairly easy and straightforward. It helped me a lot to sort of have applied things. I was totally intimidated by, big equations and by, sort of like the thought of writing a full program from scratch. But like having something like LXMLS, sort of understanding how things work underneath, really helped me to overcome this intimidation. And I got to that point where at some point, when I first heard about, kept hearing about like stochastic gradient descent, and then, I was like, oh man, this, and then people explain to you, and there's the gradient, we compute this, and then when the error gets to 0, and here's the curve, and then you can see, and there's a ball rolling down, and I was like, holy crap, this is super complicated. And then it was like, take two vectors and like, do a little bit of, very simple math between. I was like, that's it? Like, this is SGD? I was a little bit offended and a little bit disappointed even, that this thing I had been so intimidated by that seemed to be underneath all of this learning was actually pretty straightforward. It wasn't that hard at all, like when you really got down to it. So I think a lot of the fear factor comes from obscure terminology and from things being, feeling like these monoliths and these things that are really difficult to grasp as a whole. But if you break them down into small parts and make them practical and make them this thing that you want to solve and implement practically, they suddenly become a lot less, intimidating and crazy. And the last thing I wanted to say about being in a different field is the NLP community is very varied in their backgrounds. There are a lot of people that come from computer science, but there's a lot of people that come from linguistics, like me and many others. There are people from psychology. There are people even from chemistry that are, successful and hopefully happy and productive in the community. And I think it's important also to embrace that difference. I always thought I was lacking something because I come from linguistics and sociolinguistics. But then at some point I realized that it's machine learning plus X that sort of makes my own flavor of research. And, now what I do is machine learning plus sociolinguistics. And it's, it's been very good for me. It's been very productive. It's sort of given me this niche. It's given me these two things that I'm excited about that I can combine. And, you throw these two things together and there's 1,000 directions in which you can take it. So, being different, having a different background it's not a flaw. It's actually a strength if you just lean into it. Yes, you have to get like all the machine learning basics and the solid knowledge and understanding, but then it's this machine learning plus that you can do and maybe only you can do because there's nobody else who has that exact background you have. So be encouraged.
So that's a great advice and a great answer to that. So although I'd love to actually poke the remaining panelists on this aspect, but I have actually even a spicier aspect or the question that I want to ask the rest of the panelists. And then that's going to be the perfect kind of, let's say, final remarks that we're going to hear from the 3 panelists that we have left here, like the Ellie, Barbara, and Nicos, that is related to the question on the QA panel by Maciej. And then the question is about the decisions in careers that the panelists have made. And then what I have noticed was that Ellie is currently jointly appointed at Brown University and Google AI. Now, Nicos used to work at Amazon, but now has switched fully to University of Sheffield as a lecturer. And then Barbara, as far as I can tell, has been in the academia all along. So now in machine learning and NLP, what we see is that there are a lot of new techniques, and the techniques that we have developed over the past, let's say, decades or so are being used in practice. And then somehow we have 3 panelists who have chosen a 3 different paths in terms of the balance between industry and academia. Now, I think the attendees as well as I'd love to hear what made you make that decision. And then perhaps it's going to be a good chance for us to make a contrast between these 3 different options. Perhaps we can start with Barbara. Barbara, you never considered, I believe, or you haven't moved to industry yet. I guess it's always yet, right? But is there any particular reason why you're staying in academia fully?
It's funny, I get these questions recently more and more. So I should, yeah, that's a very good, I mean, I stay in academia because I really like the freedom to grow a lab essentially and see what you do. But I honestly, my honest answer to this is I actually regret not having had like an internship during my PhD as in industry. So back then I was, I was abroad, I was in the Netherlands, I did my PhD, and it was just not, I was already abroad, I didn't want to go anywhere else. And it felt like, no, what can I contribute as little Barbara to a big industry lab? So why would I go there? This was a long time back. Now things have changed, luckily, and it has become more and more, yeah, even in Denmark, we have PhDs should go to do an internship at another lab or an industry. I think I just didn't have this early on, and since then I keep it as as a sabbatical at some point. But I'm happy where I am at the moment. But I'm really curious to hear the other answers who have more experience essentially here.
So in that case, I think that naturally leads to Ellie, who has appointments in both academia and industry. So Ellie, what made you keep both appointments? And then do you find what kind of advantages as well as the disadvantages do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Barbara, I consider like myself more of an academic, right? Like that's my kind of my main appointment, and I think the main draw there is having a lab, having students, and getting to like push what feels like a big research agenda right away, right? Like you have like 6 projects going on, and you have like a big group of people, and you can kind of attack a problem from multiple angles. Like I mentioned, kind of the interpretability and the grounded stuff, and like I can kind of imagine linking all these things together, but it's like more than one person could do at a time. But when you have a lot of students working on it, it's really like, that's really exciting. I imagine people in industry who are like way high up get that feeling, but like when you come in straight out of PhD, you're not doing that much right away, which you are in academia. So that's really thrilling. And you get to operate on like a really long time horizon. Although a lot of the industry labs increasingly have these they do very basic research. But then like I love my affiliation with Google. There's a few reasons. Like I think right now we're all, we can all see that there's some work that just is better done at industry. It's really resource intensive. Like you think about stuff like I've been doing a lot of this, what does BERT know? What does BERT not know? Like those experiments are expensive to run, and you can do it easily at Google on a big grid of really fuel efficient like energy and stuff. And if I were to do it at Brown, it might just not be doable. But another really big one, I think, when I was deciding, so I did my postdoc there, and it was basically whether to stay on, is just like Google and these industry labs have just a huge pool of really good NLP people, and having just really easy access and like day-to-day conversations with them and collaborations with them, like is more than I mean, I guess Edinburgh maybe has, I think I got in this discussion at NLP last year or something, like who has the most NLP people all under one roof? Is it CMU, Edinburgh, or like one of the industry labs, something like that? But like Brown, there's like Eugene Charniak and me, and then some people who do language in the linguistics department, some people who do language and robotics. But at Brown, there's like, at Google, there's like 40 people, all who publish multiple ACL papers, right? Like it's like those are your people. And so it's great to just get to put time on their calendars really easily. And so I feel like I get the best of both worlds in terms of just having like access to lots of smart NLP people specifically, and still running my my own little like people talk about early faculty life being like a little startup, right? Like you've got your people, you've got your ideas, you're getting your funding, and you're like, okay, let's go, let's do stuff. So yeah, I think it's kind of an ideal situation.
Okay, so it looks like the Ellie has an ideal scenario or the situation. However, what I have noticed looking at the biography of Nicos is that Nicos, in fact, moved away from industry to academia. So he used to be at Amazon, but then he quit and then moved to Sheffield, if I remember correctly, or UCL first, perhaps. So yeah. Nicos, what made you actually consider the transition rather than keeping both of them together? Because it looks like there's an awesome opportunity to keep both of the affiliations, right?
I wanted to be cool. No, I'm just joking. So I think, I had actually, I participated in a similar discussion in ACL. Actually, we had a group of mentees, and actually I participated in exactly a similar topic. And I think, okay, so there are different types of roles in industry, and I think there are more applied roles and let's say more academic like roles. And in my case, Amazon is a bit more applied. So because I wanted to do, I have my own lab, follow my own research agenda, I decided just to switch entirely and move to the university rather than keep like my feet into different boats. I mean, that it's something that people need to consider about when they make decisions. I mean, as you said at the beginning, if you want to have impact by developing technology that reaches millions of people, and actually in real time people use their code, then I think industry is the right place to be. There are places in industry that I mean, they're not actually industry in the real sense of building products, but it's more like research group, big research groups, for example, DeepMind, or even in the past IBM Research and Microsoft Research, and there are many, FAIR and Facebook, and so on. So basically, that's probably something that it might be a very good opportunity. But again, you don't have your own group; you just work as an individual, unless you are very high up in the food chain. So in my case, yeah, I just wanted to follow my own research agenda. I didn't want to have any product manager telling me, oh, we need to do this project. And then I say, oh, I really hate that. You know, I want to do something else. So that's pretty much was the simple decision that I had to make. But I guess, again, a hybrid role between industry and academia, if you find this, I even know people that they have a hybrid role. The university role is more research, and actually in industry, they work in product teams. I know even this combination. So I don't know, it depends on what you want to do. In my pretty much like, I just want to do my stuff.
Yeah, it's great to actually hear about these three perspectives, and I believe that the attendees of the summer school will benefit greatly from hearing about this diverse perspective in choosing their next career move. So we are about time to wrap up, but then I'm going to ask each and every panelist to make a brief remark about what kind of things that you want to really emphasize and tell the attendees of the summer school. And in particular for Ellie, I'd like to ask Ellie to make it about how she made a transition so successfully from an econ undergrad into CS PhD, and then to the professor in computer science as well. Then we'll start with the Ellie, and then we're going to go in the random order this time. I'll just make it out on the way. So Ellie, would you like to give some nice advice to the attendees of the summer school along the line of this econ undergrad?
Yeah, actually, I think this works well, because I think my answer to that Q&A would actually just be my general advice too, which is, I think for me, a really important thing, and I think it relates to what Dirk was talking about, is kind of being able to compartmentalize and abstract away, like, and not get so you don't have to zoom down and know everything in every detail at every point in time, right? So if you kind of start and you go top down and you're like, what are the problems I care about? What am I really interested in and excited about? And you can kind of, modularize out certain pieces and learn them when they become relevant. I think right now there's just so many things happening all the time. It's really overwhelming. So you're like maybe it sounds like bad advice, but like you can black box away quite a lot of things. And that's not because you don't know how to understand them. It's just that if you try to look at everything at any point in time, it's overwhelming and it can distract from the questions you care about. So for me, like when I was starting out, I started out coming from econ, I was doing crowdsourcing. That was, there were a lot of things that were not super technical problems, but you could still start like chewing on interesting questions. And then as things became more important, you're like, now I need to learn about EM. Now I need to learn about this kind of sequence structure prediction stuff, but like you would do it piece by piece. And beyond that, you're like, okay, what are the inputs and outputs of this system? Okay, I'll treat it like a black box. And so to me, it made me feel like I couldn't be engaged in real questions, interesting questions, without having to like start from scratch, or like start by being like, let me first learn computer science and then I can contribute, right? Like you could kind of jump right in. I think that also for me, like works better with how I like to think about things anyway. Like it's more interesting and I'm better able to understand the technical content if I see how it applies to the problem I care about now, versus like when you take your classes and it's just kind of in the abstract, like here's how you multiply these matrices, or here's how you factorize. Like matrix factorization was a great example. Like when I started seeing the applications of that, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I remember learning about it, but it never sunk in, and now it sinks in. So I think in general, like I think having like a top-down approach and saying like, what is the thing I really care about? What are the big themes and important questions? And then being okay with not being in the weeds on every new thing that comes out, because the volume of new things that come out is just impossible. And especially if you're coming from a different background. And so I think just being able to be like, I have like a gist of what's going on there, but I wouldn't pretend to be an expert, and then not feeling like you have to fake it either. Just being like, oh yeah, I haven't read the details. I get the gist of what's going on, but yeah. And I think, yeah, maybe that's all I have to say.
Well, thanks, Ellie. So we'll then move on to Ronald. Would you like to share anything further with the attendance of the summer school in 2020 as opposed to 2014 when you were here?
Well, I guess the main difference between the two scenarios is the social aspect, as we were discussing. Approaching senior researchers can always be daunting. I would say a simple strategy is read one of their most recent papers and ask a very simple question about it. You don't have to be an expert. You're new to the field and they know that, and they're all good people and will be happy to chat with you. And if you're changing careers, you're here in the LXMLS, having the good stuff. Hopefully this will help you decide to take that leap of faith and dive into this amazing world of NLP and push together the boundaries.
Sounds good. The first recommendation or the suggestion seems to be the most actionable thing I've heard in this panel discussion so far. So read their paper and then ask the questions. Very simple ones are fine. I totally agree with you. Thank you. And then Dirk, would you like to have a final remark for all the attendees of the summer school?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Does it have to be actionable? Wait, Barbara
it doesn't have to, but okay. You know, like I like some action always. So
okay. Yeah. So to reiterate, be do your due diligence, learn your coding, read the latest papers. Don't sweat the details too much, as Ellie has exactly said, and kind of embrace your approach. And if there is something that's really exciting you, find out what that is, right? So in retrospect, it's always clear that, I'm here because I studied sociolinguistics and then I did NLP. And so now I have to do obviously what I'm doing right now. Those stories are really alluring and they're complete bullshit. So you have to kind of figure out as you go along, what was the connecting part? Like, why did I work on this project and then on that project? And I found both of them exciting. And there's something in there. And it's not just that, you know, you happen to work on both of them. Some connection is there. Maybe there's not a name for it yet. Maybe you find out that it's actually called active learning or reinforcement learning or, I don't know, domain adaptation. And you're like, oh, now I have a name. Okay, that's great. That's what I'm interested in. But find that out and then do the things as much as you can that allow you to follow that. You have to be flexible to some extent, right? We cannot always do all the things we want to do. You have to be lucky sometimes to be in the right place at the right time. But in general, be flexible, be open-minded, and be persistent, and, you know, sort of reach out and make yourself part of the community, and, you know, lean on the community. It's a really friendly group of people on the whole, and, you know, we're all here today as what we are because we have been part of this community and because we have inspired and helped and encouraged each other. So I really hope that we can do that to all of you attending today and in the future. So, you know, use that resource.
Right, thanks, Dirk. Well, Nicos, would you like to share something with the attendees as the final remark?
Should it be actionable?
Doesn't have to, but, you know, like, the actions always help, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think career-wise, I just go. I mean, try to put yourself in a good position. It's like it works like SGD if you think about it, right? Try to every step you take, just try to put yourself in a better position than the day before. For example, as I said to my PhD students as well, try to aim high. Of course, you need to do hard work and you know, absorb all the knowledge that you learn in the summer school and the papers that you read, the advice that you get from your supervisors. Try to use it on as the best way you can. But yeah, try to aim high. See what is what other people do in your own area in natural language processing, and yeah, it's basically if you achieve these midterm goals, then you can actually build on top of it and achieve whatever you want to do, either if you want to work in industry or in academia. And actually, when I was doing my PhD, it was a transition phase. Actually, we didn't have this option of going to industry as much back in. Actually, I graduated in 2014. It started at that period, but my focus when I was a PhD student was like, okay, what I need to do to get a good postdoc when I graduate, and actually after I get a good postdoc, how I can just get a faculty position. And of course, I wanted to see other people, what other people have done, and learn from that. And of course, the community and the network that you're going to build during this process, and actually in this summer school, will help you all along.
All right, thanks, Nicos. Barbara, last but not least, and then you were in fact the most advanced in your career when you're attending the summer school compared to all the other panelists. So I believe that you have some advice for the attendees. Quite a few of them are not just students, but are already into their actual career. So if you could share something with them, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So everything what has been said so far, I can just echo as well again. But maybe to summarize a few points is, you know, to stay curious, try to see. So an actionable item perhaps would be when you read papers, try to think about what is really the question the authors are answering, right? It's not always so obvious. We don't have it always written out, like the question being addressed or the hypothesis, because that helps you to see what can be answered next, or how does this paper fiddle into the bigger perspective of related work. But independent of this more practical thing, I think what is really educating, inspiring, and supporting are like three terms which I feel like we are very well in our community. And if you are a PhD student or a young faculty trying to explain things, what you have learned to others helps sometimes to get also a clear picture, or work with people you know, be curious, work with people you don't, you know, have very different backgrounds. Like when Dirk and I met, we came from very different traditions, right? It's also Europe versus US, me being in a very specific field, Dirk coming from the linguistic area more. Just you know, if you have a chance, work with very different backgrounds and be curious, be open. Let it sometimes go as it comes. Sometimes good things come out, just they come to you, but follow what you really like to do, so that in this way you also find people that you can connect to very well, and building this network will be essential for your future career, because as we all know, there are up and downs, and it's really, really great when we are sometimes in these not so up moments that we can reach out to others and they support each other.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists as well as the organizers who organized the great summer school and also the panel discussion itself. And then I learned a lot. I hope that the attendees of the summer school and the panel discussion also have gotten something out of this panel discussion. And then we are perfectly on time. And then that, in fact, concludes the panel discussion. I'm going to pass the microphone to Andrea then.
Right, thank you very much. It was really inspirational panel. It was amazing. So for us organizers, lots of lessons to learn from this. So I'm just going to ask people not to leave yet. So we are planning to have a group photo. And the way to make this work is for inviting attendees to become panelists. Otherwise, they will not be able to turn on their videos. So this will take a while. But basically, you know, if you can, and if you are comfortable with it, you know, just turn on your video. You're going to appear in the screen, and then we'll take a collective photo. We need to wait for a minute or so.
This is quite easier than the physical one.
That's true, that's true.
None of these, everybody jump up. 1, 2, 3.
No, I think there's a limit to the number of people that Zoom shows.
I think
I see there's like 3 panels. There's 3 panels.
Yeah, so I'm going to take several screenshots, and then we will make some magic to make everything fit into a single photo. All right. Right, smile. Another one. All right, thank you very much. And see you tomorrow in the last day of the summer school.
Thanks a lot, Andrea.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for a great panel.
3 entire pages of people. Wow, unbelievable.
Thanks, everybody.
75 people.